Hey there everybody, it's Alex here from VG247.com, and this here is Paper Mario, the Origami King, which is out pretty soon now, and I've been playing it for review, and as well as the written review on VG247.com, I just wanted to talk through some of my impressions of the game here in a video alongside some gameplay footage. All this footage is early game, so you don't have to worry about any spoilers. I suppose the best place to start then is with a little summary of how I feel about it, and so the summary is basically this. I think this is the best Paper Mario outing for quite some time, and yet it's sort of that quintessential, not quite perfect Nintendo experience, because it's charming, it's clever, it's lovely looking, but it's a bit too simple for its own good. So of course the original Paper Mario began life on the Nintendo 64 as sort of a spiritual successor, a sequel of sorts to Super Mario RPG. And so it mixed role-playing game mechanics with more traditional Mario elements like running around and jumping. Since then, the series has carried on with a bunch of sequels, and each sequel has experimented with how much role-playing there is versus the other bits of Mario. And despite that experimentation, the best one for my money still remains the second Paper Mario, which was the Thousand Year Door on GameCube. Now, I want to be clear, and how you feel about this will be a personal thing, and you'll know immediately how you feel about it. The Origami King isn't a role-playing game. It's got turn-based battles, but there's no experience points, no leveling up, anything like that. In fact, each combat encounter in the game is really more like a puzzle, and these puzzles have exact and specific best possible solutions to them, but in battle there's a ticking clock that means in more complex situations you won't always find and execute that solution in time. Battles work like this. Mario stands in the middle of an arena with concentric shapes around him. They're circular sort of lanes, and each lane can hold various enemies. And your job is to shift and rotate the columns and rows around you to shuffle enemies into larger groups that you can then execute a special move on and take out a lot of enemies at once. That will then reduce the amount of pain they'll be able to inflict on you when it's their turn. It's simple, but it's good stuff, and finding those optimum solutions can be really rewarding, even though the combat's easy. Sometimes the solution might not occur to you until it's too late, but that's sort of part of the fun of it. You adapt to the situation you create with whatever moves you make. Each combat encounter is essentially a little puzzle, so bosses are a little different but still follow the same broad idea, and in a sense this makes perfect sense, because with the character progression and growth from an RPG stripped out, combat has to more aggressively justify its existence. In a typical RPG, you'll grind weaker enemies to level up in order to beat bosses and advance the story, but without that progression, in the Origami King, you're solving each little puzzling combat encounter to advance instead. It's more like a puzzle adventure game. And that's the point here, really. This game is wonderful nonsense. It's got puns and wisecracks and knowing winks at the audience. There's that elusive, lovely Pixar quality to the narrative in that it's funny for kids, but it has lots of nods and jokes that'll land better for adults with a deeper knowledge and experience of the Mario series, and that's great. Plus, there's how it looks. The Origami King is gorgeous, as you can see. Nintendo's become really good at these real material games in recent years, so they've done stuff like Yoshi's Crafted World and the other Paper Mario titles, and this game runs with that idea. You can see the folded seams and the corrugated cardboard edges of the world. Where the baddies have stripped some of the paper away, you can glimpse how the shell of the world is held together underneath with wire and stuff like that. It has a tangible, real feeling. It makes you want to go and get some craft stuff and build your own little paper mushroom kingdom, and that's really cool. The game also has great fun with the concept of origami, and how the simple act of folding paper becomes a nefarious, even murderous thing when the entire world around you is made of paper. And this is where the Origami King really excels. It's funny, it's heartfelt, and it runs with its theme in a way that Colour Splash, the previous Paper Mario, really didn't. And there's some particularly great boss encounters that play on the idea of what paper's greatest enemies would be in this world if it were sentient. But we have to come back to that criticism, right? Which is that, well, in a sense it feels unfair, because it feels like a criticism of a core pillar of the game's design, that this isn't a role-playing game. But what you get instead of that is a fairly breezy experience pushing through puzzles where the perfect solution is satisfying to find but not really necessary to find. That's because it's never truly challenging. There's health to be found everywhere and combat encounters are pretty easy anyway. But that said, the game strikes a delicate balance. By not being too challenging, the puzzling combat encounters, they never outstay their welcome. You end up playing not so much for the story, because the story is very simple, but you play for the atmosphere, for the funny little quips characters make when you rescue them from their crumpled up state, for the lines that are written to get a rise out of long-term Nintendo players and fans. Basically, I guess what I'm saying is, you end up playing for the atmosphere. This is a fun, cheerful game released at a absolutely miserable time in the world. And it's the sort of thing you can really partially turn your brain off and just coast through, only really fully engaging when battles get a bit more challenging, and even then you don't have to do that much. And the simplicity you have is overridden really by an originality and a vigour. And I know all too well that some fans of the older Paper Mario games will once again walk away from this game disappointed because it's not the role-playing game they wanted. It's not the sequel to the Thousand Year Door that they've been waiting for. And hopefully the next game can bring back a little of that RPG depth. But regardless of that, just on charm and originality and tone alone, this is the best Paper Mario game in years. And those are my impressions. If you want to read our written review, there's a link in the description to the full written review on VG247.com. And of course, don't forget to give us a like, give us a subscribe, ring the bell, all that YouTube stuff. It really helps us out, and also it'll mean you will be among the first to see any new content we put out for Switch games, for Xbox games, for PlayStation games, next-gen stuff, and even some stuff outside games, like we might be looking at that Super Mario Lego pretty soon. So yeah, until next time everyone, see ya.